Hey everybody, this is Josh here, the Gray Bearded Green Beret. Whenever you're talking about winter camping, winter bushcraft, anything that you do in the winter, the first things that are going to get cold are your hands and your feet. So with that, I'm continuing with my DIY, my do-it-yourself kits from Lower the North. Last time I made some traditional winter moccasins. This time I'm making some felted wool liners and beaver-backed mittens. This is the DIY Winter Mitten Kit from my friends up in Canada, up at Lower the North. You know, one of the great things about making your own, the DIY aspect of these kits, is that not only do you learn a new skill, and that skill is valuable, and the fact that you get a custom piece of gear that you made, but those skills are also applicable to other skills. Plus knowing how to repair it if it gets broken in the field, or once you have the skill, it's something that you can recreate in its entirety. This is felted wool. You know, this is bison hide. You know, this is beaver fur. So if you know how to felt wool and how to tan hides, this is something that you could recreate from the ground up. And that, to me, makes it more valuable than just purchasing a pair that are already done. Again, this is not meant to be instructional. You can find the instructional videos over at Lower the North here on YouTube. So I started off by making the actual felted wool inserts, the inner mittens themselves. And these were, of course, measured for my particular size. These are custom made for my hands. And for the inners, because these are the inners that are going to go into the outer mittens, these are sized one down from the sizing chart. After I measured my hand for the size to figure out what size I was, all I had to do was cut out the paper patterns that also came with the kit. I traced those paper patterns out onto the wool felt. And then all I have to do is cut those out. Now to sew these up, you can use the artificial sinew that comes with the kit, or you can use the supplied yarn and the darning needle that comes with the kit. The yarn was probably a little more difficult than the sinew would have been. So if you're looking for just pure function, then you know the sinew would probably be the best way to go. But for me, because these are sewn kind of with the seam being visible, I kind of wanted the contrast of the different colored yarn, and I really like the aesthetics of it. So to start these, you place the thumb onto the palm with the thumb pointing down, and then you're just going to begin sewing. It uses the same knots, it uses the same stitches, and a lot of the same techniques that I used when I made the winter moccasins. So a lot of those transfer over from one kit to another. Once you've got the beginning portion of it sewn on, you'll rotate the thumb piece so that the thumb piece lines up with the thumb on the actual palm. Once you've got those lined up, you'll continue sewing around the thumb, and you'll sew it on down to the wrist. Now, one thing that I noticed whenever you're using the darning needle, and I kind of learned this halfway through making the first mitten, was, you know, these fibers are extremely tough. So with a kind of a pointy, a sharp needle, if you hit one of those fibers and you're trying to push through or cut those fibers, it really doesn't work all that well. So that darning needle has actually got more of a blunt tip on it, and you use that to kind of weave your way through the fibers and make your way out the other side. So it took me a while to figure out that's what that was for. Once you get down to the wrist, then you're going to come back up, creating that X pattern that we created whenever we did the winter moccasin lowers. Kind of 5 stitches back up, making this X pattern like this. And then we finish it off by going through that last hole 3 times. On that third time, you leave a small loop, and then you take that needle and create a round turn by going through that small loop twice, and then pull that tight, snip it off, and you finish that off. And I do that every time I made it back down to the wrist. Once you've got your thumb piece sewn on, it's time to sew the back onto the palm, and then also onto the thumb piece. So all you have to do is line up the marks that you transferred from the pattern that go on the back and also on the palm. Start your stitching there, and you're going to continue to whip stitch around the edge and pull tight until you get to the end. And every time I got to a seam, like right here with the thumb piece, I put an extra stitch on either side of that seam, because that's a stress point. That's a point of tension that I want to kind of reinforce. So extra stitch there, stitch all the way down to the wrist, and again do 5 back stitches, and then finish that off just like you would anytime you reach the wrist. Now along the bottom, You have another optional thing. You know, if you're just looking for function, again, this is something that you could probably omit. But I was looking more at the aesthetic quality of it. So I like a more finished look that the blanket stitch gave down here at the bottom. So I went ahead and did the blanket stitch along the wrist cuff. Overall, I think it made for a nicer looking finished project. So I think it was a nice touch. Once you've got your first mitten done, just repeat the process and make your second mitten. I think what I like most about this is really nice, really thick felted wool. And I like that the actual finished project has some dimension. Right? It's not just, you know, two pieces of flat wool that you've stitched together around the outside, you know, so you run around looking like Ronald McDonald, looking like one of them big foam fingers that you're cheering your local football team on with. These actually have some dimension, some shape, so they fit better. If they fit better, they're going to function better. So really nice felted wool inner mitts. Once you've got your inner mittens done, it's time to move on to the outers. Again, with these, I had measured for size. This is going to be the actual size, not one step down like I did for the inner mittens. This is going to be the actual size that I measured into. Cut out the pattern and trace that pattern out onto the material that you're going to be using. For these particular mittens, I'm using two different types of hides. I've got a bison hide and then I've got a hair-on beaver hide. For the bison hide, when I'm cutting out the bison hide, I used a pair of heavy-duty high carbon steel scissors that are extremely sharp that cut through this thick leather very well. The beaver fur is a little more delicate and you want to kind of be careful not to cut the hair. So I actually, when I cut these out, I actually used an X-Acto knife to get it exactly where I wanted it. Just a very light touch, barely going through the skin portion of the hide and not going through the hair. Cut through the hair, your mitten will end up looking like it got a barracks cut on Sunday from your drunk roommate. Ask me how I know. For these, there wasn't really a place to add the Lore of the North logo. They recommend it goes on the backside, but I've got beaver fur on the backside of mine, so it just wasn't really a place to put that. And then on the front side, it would end up being on the palm and would just get wore off. But what I did do, that you don't have to do, is took some of the decorative trim that would normally go all the way around, and I just put it along the bottom edge of the wrist here, just to kind of tie it in. It's the same pattern that's on my mucklucks, my winter moccasins. Same pattern will be on my Amtrak. Same pattern will be on my Amtrak. Same pattern will be on my Anorak, which will be my next project. This whole series is me getting ready for winter camping here in the Adirondacks. Snowstorm happening outside right now. But anyway, I put that on there. I just hand sewed it on there because really what holds it in place is when you stitch it in here at the seams, and that just kind of keeps it flat. That's not functional at all. It's completely, purely aesthetic, but I just like the way it looks. So I took a few extra minutes to sew that on. Of course, you could leave that out if you want. Now for the beaver back mittens, these are actually sewn inside out. But as far as the techniques go and the knots and the stitches, it's the same. It's the same process you used to create your inners. You'll use those to create the outers. So again, with the thumb down, you're going to begin sewing. After you finish that first portion, you're going to rotate it so the thumb lines up with the thumb on the palm, and you're going to continue sewing that around. What you'll find is the beaver hide is much lighter, and it's a lot more delicate compared to the bison hide. So you have to be a little more careful. You have to really watch, you know, where you place your stitches to make sure that it's not too close to the edge. One thing that I also found is as you're stitching that fur together, make sure you keep pushing that fur to the inside before you sew it up. And another thing that I noticed was, especially when you're sewing this seam here, where the thumb piece goes onto the back, that is beaver on beaver right there. I guess I can't really say that on YouTube. That's not safe for kids. Here at this seam where the beaver hides are joined together, it's especially important right there to make sure you don't rip anything out. What I noticed was the fur where it joins together especially wants to kind of push back out, and then that kind of loosens the whip stitch as you go. And so what I ended up doing to get around that was every 3 or 4 stitches or so, when I saw it starting to loosen, I would go ahead and go through a second time in the same hole and kind of lock that in and maintain that tension a little better. It's also very important for the wrist closure strap. This is just a simple buckle strap system here with some 3/4 inch webbing. But once you get down to where you're about 2.5 inches from the wrist, you need to start incorporating your wrist strap, your wrist closure strap. And it's very simple to do. Just have it come through a little bit and incorporate it into that seam. So instead of going through the hide and then through the beaver fur, you're actually going to go through the hide, go through the webbing, then go through the beaver fur. So what I did was, because this is another stress point, is at the very top edge of the webbing where I started to incorporate it, I actually went through twice. And then when I got down to the last stitch that was going to be incorporated into that webbing, I went through that twice as well, and then continued on towards the wrist. Once I got to the wrist again, just 5 back stitches, lock it off just like we always do. Once you've got that thumb piece in place and you've got your half of your wrist closure strap incorporated, it's as simple as coming back up, lining up the marks from your paper patterns, and you begin sewing all the way around. You're basically sewing the back piece to both the thumb piece and the palm. Once you get down to the side again, 2.5 inches up, you're going to incorporate the other side of your wrist closure strap. Once you get to the bottom edge again, 5 back stitches, go around 3 times, through that loop twice, giving you that locking round turn, and then tighten that off. Once you've got those pieces sewn together, go ahead and turn it right side out now, and then push the seams flat with your fingers. Once you've done that, you can take your wool mitt, put it on, and then test your fit. Should be a little tight in the beginning because that hide is going to stretch over time, and it's going to fit a lot more perfectly as time goes on. Once you've got that done, all you have to do is make your second outer mitt. That's it. I've got custom fitting, handmade beaver backed mittens that I made myself. Thanks again to Laura of the North for another great do-it-yourself kit. I was really impressed with the quality of everything that came in this kit. The felted wool was outstanding, the bison hide is outstanding, and you know, the beaver hide is just beautiful. Gorgeous pair of mittens, if I do say so myself. Thanks again, Laura of the North. Thanks to all you guys for watching. I appreciate your likes, your comments, your views, your shares. Questions, put them down below. Again, if you want instructional videos on how to do these because you got your own kit from Laura of the North, that's over on the Laura of the North channel. So I'm going to continue this series, getting myself ready for some winter camping, some winter bushcraft. And until next time, hope to see you guys in the woods.